Hey, welcome back to the Personality Hacker Podcast. My name is Joe Mark Witt.
And I'm Antonia Dodge. And today we're going to be talking about chakras. So we're entering a space that's a little on the woo side.
You know, the last few episodes, we've been talking about a lot of stuff that's not, personality type related. We've been pulling in some other models and interviewing people about healing work. We've been talking about a lot of stuff that's different. I like this track that we're on this season of podcasting. I think it's an exciting new experience for us to be talking about stuff that's outside the realm of things like Myers-Briggs or Enneagram or any of the other personality type models specifically.
Yeah, well, and especially as it relates to healing, because you and I mean, if you're familiar with our coaching model, we call it the HAT model, healing, achievement, and transcendence. And our opinion is that, or our model that we use to determine where somebody is at in their life and the kind of things that they need to be focused on as an individual, usually falls into one of those three categories. They're either in a healing time period of their life, an achievement time period, or a transcendence time period. And we focus on achievement. I mean, I think we say that probably every time we do a healing podcast. We're like, hey, we're an achievement people. I mean, we're into achievement. That's what we do. But you and I have been in a healing time period of our lives, because our hypothesis is that when you're in an achievement time period of your life and you put more pressure through the pipes, that's when a bunch of cracks get exposed. And so then you have to go back and do some healing work. And that's what happened with us, with Personality Hacker. Personality Hacker started scaling. We started getting busier, and it required more from us that we were not necessarily prepared to give it. So we put more pressure through the pipes, and then all of a sudden a bunch of cracks got exposed. And so you and I have been in massive healing time period in comparison to other time periods of our life. We've been really attending to those cracks. So I think our interest in healing has now segued into a lot of healing podcasts in order to help other people who might be in a similar time period as us.
Yeah, you might have seen people who, they all of a sudden become a movie star overnight, or they get massive success in business or wealth, and then all of a sudden their lives just start to unravel around them because it's putting so much pressure and attention on their life now. They've achieved something. It's like, oh man, and they haven't done some of the healing work they need to do, but there's no time. Like, they have interviews, they've got things to do, they've got all this wealth to manage now, or these businesses to run, or this success to handle. And here they've got things they've got to deal with. And almost sometimes, especially in personal growth, this can be tough. If like us, we're teaching a lot of personal growth elements, it can be embarrassing to admit that we've got stuff to work on when we're supposed to be leaders and positing good things in the world. It's like, oh man. But then that's also some of that process too, is to go ahead and say, well, I've not arrived either. I'm still working on myself just as much. And here's some healing stuff I'm going through. Yeah. And it just gives us more content to talk about too, which is great, because we get to go and with our own experience. It seems to be what our business model or our teaching method is we go through an extreme experience or something ourselves, and then we help make that available to other people. And I believe that's one of our superpowers that we bring to the world, which I'm really happy about. It can be challenging though at times.
Yeah, well, I think that's our rationalization or story for why we keep sitting in front of a microphone and talking as if we know what we're talking about. We're it can feel kind of regressive a little bit sometimes, where we feel like we create this content and people will write in and they're like, oh, I took 4 pages of notes based on your podcast. And we're like, people are taking notes? That might not be a good thing. At the same time,
I think it's a great thing.
It is. Yes, it is a great thing. It is an amazing and surprising thing. It's a great thing. And also, sometimes it can feel a little, like you said, there's some self-consciousness around it. It can sometimes feel regressive. But that's where we're at. We're in a healing time period. So we don't show up as our best self all the time. And some of the tools that we've picked up along the way in this healing time period, as I mentioned, can feel a little woo. And I think it's because healing, when you're going through a healing time period, when you're dealing with traumas from the past, or just, and it doesn't have to be like a major trauma, it doesn't have to be like a big thing where, somebody horribly exploited you, or you are on the receiving end of terrible treatment. It can just maybe be things that you didn't learn that maybe you should have picked up at the same time that your contemporaries were picking it up, and you just didn't pick that lesson up, or you were just never put in a context where that was relevant to you. And so when you go back to do healing work, it feels like you need a lot less of like formula. formula that is a tried and true linear progression. Here's how you get from A to B to C. When you're in an achievement time period, almost everything is some tried and true tested formula. That's what you want. You want to know how to succeed. And so you're looking for examples to co-opt for yourself in order to become, massively successful in whatever field you want to. But with healing, it's not so formulaic. Healing is pretty much anything that will create a salve. I think of when people are in like a physical pain situation, you'll do pretty much anything to get rid of that physical pain.
Yeah.
And when you're in a situation where you're highly traumatized, I mean, it is messy. It is not a clean process to get people to a physically healed space if they're in a time period of, say, massive trauma. You've got tourniquets and you've got blood going everywhere and you've got like people rushing around in hospitals and like doing everything they can to try to save you. And so when you're going through a time period of healing in your own life, it can kind of feel that way. It can feel like you're just doing anything you can to get through this trauma and remove the pain. So for our experience in healing, we have branched out to a lot of areas that, again, I call it the woo. And some people might find the term woo-woo to be a little, patronizing. But it really, I guess the point is that most of the things that I have found to be super powerful in the healing context have been really fantastic. If nothing else, they've been fantastic metaphors. They've been ways to put language to situations I'm struggling with, creating distinctions around. And I've discovered that for at least me, if I can put language to something, it feels a lot more manageable at that point. So when we talk about things like chakras, when we talk about things like, you and I have done Qigong sessions. We've done a lot of different, meditation retreats, and we've gone to an area that maybe some people might not feel super comfortable with. But for us, they were incredibly powerful. If for no other reason, they helped give language to situations we were experiencing. They helped us with visualizations. And one of those metaphors that was super helpful for me was the model of the chakras. Now, chakras originally come from an Eastern religious concept, particularly with it's got its roots in Hinduism and Buddhism. And chakras are effectively energy centers in the body. The word chakra means wheel or like a circle. I always think of the Apple, like on my Apple laptop. Anytime my Apple is thinking, I get like a little wheel that looks like a beach ball and it just like turns. And I think of that when I think of a wheel or a circle, when I think of the chakras. And they're located in 7 different places in the body. Now, each chakra center is, in traditional chakra belief or concept, is a place that your corporeal self, I'm trying to remember exactly the word they use. I think they call it the subtle body. It's not your physical body. It's a energetic body that meets somewhere in the middle with your physical body. It's very attached to what Hindus call, or the Indians might call, prana, and prana means like life energy. And each of these chakra centers is a place where the prana lands and has a different impact depending upon where the wheel or chakra center is located. Each of these chakra centers, and Western concepts have sort of co-opted this and turned each of these centers into like a matching up of like the endocrine system, which is attached to like different glands in the body. And I find that to be very interesting because I've noticed that with a lot of the stories, narratives, beliefs, religions that we have designed as humans, I've noticed that certain themes tend to go through all of these different narratives. It's almost like Joseph Campbell's concept of the hero and the archetypical hero. You see like the same heroes coming up in stories regardless of where on the planet this story came from. The same archetypical heroes show up over and over again. And I've discovered that to be the case with a lot of healing work as well, or these stories around how energy works. So the chakras seem to be a theme that shows up over and over again, regardless of whether or not they're called chakras or endocrine system or whatever. They seem to have sort of a theme that shows up over and over, almost like a pattern that humanity has recognized. and has gotten sort of implanted in the social unconscious. And each of these chakras locates or points out a different area of energy or power or a relationship that humans seem to have with power in distinctive ways. So we're going to talk about what those 7 chakras are, the way that the power or energetic element shows up for them, and different ways that understanding this, regardless of whether or not this is part of maybe your belief practice. You might be somebody who's super into chakras, and this might be a part of your belief practice, and you believe that they empirically exist, which is perfectly fine. Or you might favor more towards like my end of the spectrum, which is that it's a fantastic metaphor and helps give language to some of these concepts that we might be struggling with and help create distinctions. Regardless of where you fall in this spectrum, and maybe even you're a skeptic and you think it's all BS, which is totally fine too, I still would recommend that you maybe give some credence to it, at least as a metaphor, because understanding some of these concepts can be really powerful.
So let's get started on talking about the chakras themselves. And, these are the basic 7 that most people have agreed upon as the major chakras. There are some other energy centers in the body that other disciplines, other practices look at. But for the sake of this podcast and today, we're just going to talk about the major 7 that most people agree about and work with in traditional and modern views of this. And usually when I look at the chakras, I think about the chakras, I always start from the bottom and I work up. So if you imagine in your bodies, you imagine your spine, you're sitting up like with your legs crossed in front of you, sitting up straight in like the lotus position, for example. And you imagine these energy centers starting at the base of where your perineum is, down at the very base of your body, just below your genital area, and then moving all the way up to the top of your head. You have chakra points all the way down. And I'll just go over a quick overview of all 7, and then we'll detail these out. So at the bottom, the perineum area, down at the base of your body, or the base of your torso area, just below your genitals, would be the root chakra. And then just above that, right near your sexual organs, is the sacral chakra. Above that, around the belly button area, right in your stomach, your tummy, where your stomach pushes out when you breathe in, would be the solar plexus. And then up by your heart would be the heart chakra. And then up by your throat would be the throat chakra. Your forehead would be the brow chakra. And then the top of your head is what's called the crown chakra. And Westerners have put some colors onto this model. So I'll reference the colors. We'll reference the colors as we go through this as well. And we'll talk about what each of these chakras represents energetically in your body. So let's start way back down at the base, the root chakra. And the root chakra is really the connection that you have to the physical earth. It's the grounding chakra. A lot of people associate this with survival, trust, being able to go ahead and have security in your life. Often this is represented in the color red. The root chakra is represented in a very slow, and often chakras, because remember the word chakra means wheel or circle, you imagine these as actual spinning energy fields. And so this is facing downward and spinning toward the earth with the color red in a very slow rotation. And this energy field supposedly grounds you at the base of your body to the earth, to the groundedness that you bring to the world.
Yeah, some people feel like the root chakra also interplays with how we're taking care of ourselves and taking care of other people in that basic survival way. Or, I mean, we're out of a survival time period at this time period of history for the most part. So when we think of survival, you've got to basically update that for the modern world. What does survival mean in the modern world? And survival in the modern world a lot of times refers to like how we're energetically dealing with each other. Energy management is a huge part of the modern world survival technique. Trying to make sure you have enough to be able to deal with like your 100, your 1,000 emails sitting in your inbox and all the ways in which we're massively over communicated with each other. And I actually wrote an article on the Personality Hacker blog that talked about using this concept of the root chakra to be able to deal with other people's energy if you happen to be empathic. If you happen to be somebody who tends to take on other people's bad juju or their negative energy. One of the worst things you can do is just hold that negativity inside of yourself because it becomes like a poison or a toxin for you. But if you can imagine the root chakra having like literal roots going to the ground, if you can find yourself in a space outside, especially if you can take your shoes off and visualize that root going to the ground, then you can allow the earth to use that root structure to pull the toxins, that negative energy, into the ground itself. The concept being that the ground is like the ultimate dialysis machine for the world, right? The ground is used to taking toxins in and repurposing it and changing it, transmogrifying it into something healthy. That's what the ground does. And so if you can use the metaphor of the root chakra to allow those roots to pull that negative energy into the ground, and you just sort of let it go and let the earth have it to take care of it and recycle it and do with it what you will, then now you don't have to harbor that toxic energy inside of you. Now, whether or not this is empirically happening, it kind of doesn't matter, because I've noticed that when people take on other people's bad energy, negativity, and I've even done this for myself. I'm not particularly empathic for strangers or for the general population, but I definitely have an empathic quality for the people I love. So if I pull in negativity from, the people who are closest to me, I will find myself feeling impacted by that negativity, and I'll go do this exercise. I'll go outside, I'll take my shoes off, I'll touch the ground, and I'll imagine my root chakra allowing those toxins to have a conduit to just get slurped into the ground and let the ground take care of it. Now, that's one way in which an understanding of chakras can help, because it can help with the visualization of getting those toxins, that energy, out of you. And so if you're trying to kind of conceptualize what the root chakra means and how that can show up and how that would be like understanding the root chakra, how that could be helpful for you, that's one like exercise that will help you get in touch with that root chakra and help you feel like you're taking care of yourself. And at the same time, you're helping taking care of other people because you pulled that energy in, right? Like you took that toxin for them and now you're going to distribute it to the earth, and you do that through the root chakra.
Yeah. And it's also associated with elimination. I mean, you're down by all your plumbing where you physically eliminate things out of your body. And so this metaphor carries there. In the physical world, you're eliminating your waste down by this root chakra. And you could also energetically remove waste and allow things to flow outward, eliminate them out of your energetic field. And again, what we're talking about here is accessing the part of your imagination, the part of your psyche that can imagine this happening. Whether it's actually happening or not is up for debate, but your mind may not know the difference. And if your mind can imagine something, your mind can basically simulate that thing's happening for you. And so you can imagine yourself purging out emotions, imagine this energy flowing downward. And it often makes people feel happier, makes people feel relieved that the energy's been processed through and something they can purge out of their system. So we're talking about accessing imagination. We're talking about accessing the energy that your mind can perceive and project, basically. And whether that has a physical connection there, that's for each person to determine in your own mind. But I like to see it as a lot of visualization, imagining energy moving and imagining these colors and these chakras in their different places. It's worked for me in that way a lot.
Yeah. Well, and also I was just going to tack on before we move up to the next chakra, the sacral chakra. If you have difficulty feeling grounded, if you are a person who has trouble with keeping your head in the clouds all the time, or you don't have a sense of grounding in general, if your life has become, untethered, or the human version of, like a brush fire, like a fire just jumping from thing to thing, a flame just jumping from activity to activity. If you have trouble just slowing down and feeling present and feeling grounded and rooted, this is the area that might need some attention. It might need a little bit of attention to be applied to that energetic center and to do some exercises around imagining you being rooted to the ground, having some visualizations of that, that spiral going downward and giving you some connection to the earth and some stillness there. And so if that's something that you've struggled with, then it's probably your root chakra that needs some attention and some time.
So the next chakra up is located near the sexual organs, around the pubic bone area. And again, this energy field is called the sacral chakra. It's usually the color orange. It's associated with sexual power, sexuality, sensuality, your creative, expressive self, the deep creativity that you bring to the world. It often interplays with your relationships and your emotions. This is the center point of all of that. And this chakra obviously is located around the sexual center. So it's going to be a lot of how you relate to other people and doing a lot of imagination or visualizations around this chakra can help with relationship issues, can help with all these kind of different connection pieces with other humans, and particularly in romantic relationships or sexual relationships.
Yeah, this is a place where you build intimacy or helps build intimacy. And you could see how, in particular, in pair bond relationships, intimacy and sexuality are very close, hand in hand. One thing I've noticed about a lot of these chakras and energetic centers is that the desire is to have a balance there. So anything that's like too much or too little is a sign of a lack of balance. So a person who maybe has trouble with sexuality, like being interested or
impotent, maybe.
Impotent, right. Maybe feels highly repressed. This is the area that's going to show up in. And then also if a person has trouble ever getting satisfied, or if they overvalue the sexual component but undervalue the relating component or the intimacy component, then that might be something where the sacral chakra needs some attention as well, because that's not balanced either. So the way that your sexuality, the relationship it has with intimacy, is the part of the balance that you're looking for. And so if you can't ever be satisfied because you're repressing your sexuality or because you're overemphasizing it, then this is the energetic section that might be out of balance.
The next chakra up is right near the belly button, right at the stomach point, which is the solar plexus. This is associated with power and wisdom, personal power, personal autonomy. This is usually represented as the color yellow, and it's about energy, vitality, the connection to the self, and showing up as a sovereign, complete unit as a person that can show up to the world in a powerful way.
Yeah, like personal authority.
Basically, inner authority, inner alignment, things of this nature, personal power.
Right. Like the word sovereignty, I think, is huge. And this is something that I think is one of those distinctions we mentioned before that, for me, makes the chakra system so helpful. Your power center is different than your root system. So if you're feeling not particularly grounded, that doesn't mean you don't feel a sense of sovereignty. And if you're feeling a lack of sovereignty, that doesn't mean you're not necessarily grounded or rooted. So there's a distinction here between feeling like steady and safe and rooted and okay, and a sense that you are allowed to go for what you want, and that you're allowed to have desire, and that you are allowed to have that sovereignty and that willpower and that drive to go for what you want. Or again, it could be a lack of balance, and maybe you are overly permissive to yourself, that to a point where you'll exploit and hurt other people, and that your sense of sovereignty runs over the top of others and their desires and doesn't respect other people's solar plexus chakras. So that would be another way that would show up in an imbalanced way. But this is a distinction that if you're feeling like you might have some question about that, I could see how a person who's maybe lacking sovereignty in their life might assume it's from a sense of trauma and go back and go, well, but I actually had a pretty good upbringing. Like I feel pretty rooted and safe. I don't have a sense of like of survival, or like I'm inherently unsafe, or the universe is a hostile place or whatever. I actually feel pretty rooted, but I might not have permission to make the changes in my life that I want to. And so that would be not a root chakra situation. That would be a solar plexus chakra situation.
So this is a big one for me. I think this is the biggest one for me of all of the chakras that I use my imagination to access certain times of meditation or whatever I'm doing. This one is the one that I've spent the most time working with, because I've had this like back and forth struggle with sovereignty in my life. And I think that word sovereignty, again, is a great word. This feeling like I'm a self-contained unit of my own internal personal power. I'm not having to rely on anyone else for my inner power, my inner wisdom, my inner alignment, my inner sovereignty. And so what I'll often do is I'll turn on, some meditative music. I'll sit down in the lotus position and I'll imagine a beam of yellow light, almost like it's piercing through my stomach area near my belly button, back and forth. And I'll amplify that element. I'll imagine it clearing itself out, cleaning itself out, and allowing energy from the lower two chakras, the root and the sacral, to move upward through that power center, that solar plexus chakra. I'll imagine that light, and I'll try to imagine feeling that strengthen and clean out and feel open, like an open channel in my life. And I've noticed that if I do these exercises often the next day, later that day or often the next day, I'll feel more empowered. I'll feel more like I'm walking around grounded, centered. People can't get to me as easily. I come and show up with more of a sovereign presence. And so I love the fact I can use my imagination in this way, in this chakra center, to help me feel better about showing up in life. It's a great tool set that I've encountered with this.
Yeah, I was doing some coaching with a client who is an INFJ, and we were doing some work around what's called cord cutting. And we'll be talking about what cords are and cord cutting in a future podcast, maybe even the next podcast. But when we're doing this, cords have a tendency to attach to the different chakras. And so when we were talking about a cord in her life and what that looks like and what that means, we started talking about the solar plexus chakra. And when she was imagining it, she said she imagined it as a digital blue color, like the color that comes off of a computer screen, that sort of backlit, what is it called? LCD sort of lighting, that sort of blue neon digital color. I thought that was really interesting, especially when we're talking about using our imagination or sort of these visualizations to get ourselves in certain spaces. And I thought that was really interesting because if you've heard our previous podcast on the INFJ type, the 10-year-old in the car model is introverted thinking, or what we call accuracy, which is a fairly digital place. And when we were doing our coaching, she indicated that the power she was bringing to a specific situation, which is why we're talking about the cord cutting and the chakras, she was going to a very cold, distant place. And that was how she was trying to summon her power. And I referred back to the Western concept of the colors of the chakras. And I said, well, actually, the solar plexus chakra is yellow, like a bright yellow. And she's like, oh, that's weird because I keep seeing it as a digital blue. And so we did a little bit of work, imagination work, sort of visualization work around pulling her power from a space that was digital, separate. Her power was in removing relationships or getting distance from relationships. We went back to that yellow color and we imagined it was like the color of the sun and the power of the sun that was living within her and the warmth that would come from it. And if something's digital, you have to plug it into an outside source. So we more thought of it as a source that comes from within, not something you have to plug into, but that all the power of the sun is still in you. And it or is in you, and you could still have that digital place, that sort of electric place, because if electricity, let's pretend we had some way of sending electricity to the sun, it's not like it would go anywhere. It would just be absorbed by the power that was already there. So then as she was imagining this sort of bright yellow sun energy, it didn't remove the blue energy, it just absorbed it. It just took it and spread out and became warm. And by the end of the session, I was like, so how do you feel? I was like, how you doing? She goes, I feel incredible. I feel so empowered. I feel like I'm just completely filled with this power coming through me. I feel like I can take on anything. And I think that's one of the powers of being able to have these metaphors, this language, is that you can do visualization exercises and then call upon a desired emotion and then just sort of find it inside of you and focus on it and work on it and envelop it or develop it and allow it to fill you. And so again, these exercises that you can do with different chakra centers can be very profound and very powerful, especially if you're struggling with, say, in the solar plexus chakra, feeling a sense of sovereignty or feeling a sense of power.
Yeah. The next chakra going up is the heart chakra, located near the heart area of your chest. And this is the chakra that's associated with love, healing, connection. It's often represented with the color green. It also brings balance and connection into our lives. And this is often the chakra that, lovers will connect with. Someone who's in love with someone else will almost feel this visualization of this energy of connection to someone else's heart. We talk about, oh, that person has my heart, or I fell in love. Their heart is mine. It's a sense of this deep feeling in this chakra center of love and attention and connection with other human beings that you're in love with. And it can be romantic love. It can also be friendship or, familial love. It can be all sorts of love or expression of love there at the heart chakra.
And general compassion.
General compassion for humanity, things of this nature.
I've also heard some schools of thought say that the ego might live here. So identity might be presented in the heart chakra. And it's a general sense of like sort of your positivity or your goodwill towards others, your ability to maintain a positive attitude. I usually have to do some work in the heart chakra. My heart chakra is your solar plexus is your Achilles heel, and my heart chakra is my Achilles heel. And I think it's a matter of being willing to expand and be vulnerable. There's vulnerability that comes in maintaining a general positive attitude. There's vulnerability that comes in having compassion for others. I almost feel like I don't have enough heart space to encapsulate all of the compassion that I feel for the world a lot of times, because I have a strong sense of empathy, and especially for the challenges that the world faces and the struggles that people go through. And I feel like I burn out my heart center. Like I burn out my heart chakra a lot because it's too much for me to bear. And then I have to run to some, comforting narrative or story. And I feel like the more work I've done around the heart chakra, it's given me more emotional fortitude. It's expanded my ability to hold those feelings. And it's expanded my ability to maintain a positive attitude, even amongst having compassion for people who are in bad situations or global challenges or global crises. The more work I do on my heart chakra, the more it expands and the more room I have. So I don't get so overwhelmed, and I don't feel so, impotent, I guess. So for me, it's usually the heart chakra that requires the most focus. And I'll do exercises. I'll do what I'll call agape exercises. If you've heard our podcast on the 4 different definitions, Greek definitions for love, agape is one of them. And agape is considered principal love, or the love you have for humanity or creatures just because they exist. So I'll do agape exercises where I'll just allow myself to feel filled with love for everything and just let myself sit there and be with that love. And love is incredibly fortifying. At least I've found it to be. So I'll allow myself to have that sense of compassion, and I won't let myself necessarily go to the more negative aspects of that, which is anytime somebody feels pain, I now feel pain. I create a segmentation of like that will come later. First, I'm just going to exercise love muscle. And then as I expand and exercise love muscle, then when I am face to face with things that hurt my heart or, might just sort of destroy me because I'm like, oh, we're not going to be able to deal with the malnutrition issue in my lifetime. And I think of the statistics of all the children that die of malnutrition. It's just so overwhelming to me. People who are dealing with war situations. Anybody has to deal with a situation of living in quote unquote interesting times. And I'm so much better equipped to deal with that if I focus on expanding my love as opposed to removing it. The more I remove it, it's not like that stuff doesn't affect me. It's just I don't have the space to hold for it. And the more I work on that heart chakra, the more space I have to hold for the things that also are painful.
Continuing up the body where the chakras are located, the next location of the next chakra is the throat chakra, obviously located at the throat center. And this chakra is usually represented with the color blue. It is the chakra of expression, communication, your literal voice, voicing your opinions, your thoughts, expressing yourself. And sometimes it can be associated also with healing. And this chakra is where we generate the things we're going to say into the world, the ideas we have, the expressive self that we bring. So trouble with this chakra can show up basically where you have difficulty expressing yourself. You have a metaphorical frog in your throat. You can't speak. You might have a strain. You might get sore throats. There might be a difficult expressing your ideas and some of the things that you want to say to the world. So this is an area of keeping this clear allows you to voice some of your concerns, allows you to voice what's going on for you, allows you to express yourself fully.
Well, and also articulate your purpose. I think the creative communication that is required, that articulation that is required to state your mission or your purpose, like the thing that you're meant to say. Your throat chakra needs to be healthy in order for you to communicate that concept. And I mean, it's almost easier to tell when somebody's throat chakra has issues than just about any of their other chakras, because it can show up in their actual, their voice, their tonality. When there's a person who speaks so low, I can't hear what they're saying. You know, those people who are like, they just speak so softly and you cannot make out what they're saying. That's a throat chakra issue. people are meant to speak at a volume where it is accessible to other people's hearing. Like if it's too soft, it means that they do not feel comfortable speaking. And then on the other side of the aisle with, this concept of balance, somebody who can't stop talking when they have to dominate all conversations, when it almost feels like what you're getting from them is like just the vocalization of a stream of consciousness inside their mind, or they can't be an input at all. They have to constantly be an output. That's a throat chakra issue.
It could be not feeling heard, so you just keep expressing, hoping that somebody will hear you. Someone will understand your expression, and you just feel like the more quantity I have of expression, the more someone will understand what I'm trying to tell them. And both these could be imbalanced. And I think when you said earlier about this idea of balancing energies in our lives, using some metaphor, but also this idea of balancing, that's how I like to look at it. Because if you have something too much on either direction, you're going to have an imbalance. It's going to come up in a way that's not helpful to you in life. So moving up again to the brow chakra. This is located, some people call this the third eye chakra. It's represented often with an indigo color. It's located on your forehead, just above your nose, centered between your eyes. And this is the chakra associated with intuition, awareness, intuitive understanding, wisdom, insight into what's going on in the world. And when we say intuition, we don't mean this in the terms of how we here at Personality Hacker define intuition of advanced pattern recognition. While it can be associated with that, this is more in the terms of a spiritual intuition, or like an intuitive gut sense in some ways, getting maybe intuitive insights into things that maybe advanced pattern recognition, like we talk about here at Personality Hacker, or maybe they're just hunches. The other day I had this weird hunch that our daughter was sick. I don't know where I got this hunch from. I just had this feeling I wonder if I'm going to get a call today from our preschool that our daughter's ill. And certainly enough, within an hour, we were called and we're told that our daughter had gotten sick at preschool. We need to come pick her up. And it was really weird. I was like, wow, just an hour ago, I had that thought run through my head. Where did that come from? I don't know if that was advanced pattern recognition. That would be really tough to pattern recognize that. It must have just been an instinct I had as a parent, somehow tied to my child. I don't know how to explain it, but that's something that happens to me often in my life. And I think that's associated with that intuition part, that intuition chakra, or the third eye chakra at the brow level.
Yeah, it's important that we make sure to state that this is not something that is, say, unavailable to anybody who's not an intuitive. There are all sorts of styles of intuition, and there's all sorts of styles of almost like a sense of clairvoyance that who knows what their source is. And I was having a conversation earlier today that, here at Personality Hacker, in order to explain how intuition works, we've chosen to use the concept of advanced pattern recognition. But I think all of the cognitive functions have a form of pattern recognition woven into them. And that would include the sensing processes, the two sensing cognitive functions. There's this, when you walk into a room, if there's another person in that room, you might not see them, but you might feel their presence, like their energy. And I would say that would be probably something hosted in the extroverted sensing or sensation process. So there's all sorts of styles of intuition. The same thing with quote unquote women's intuition, which I don't think is women's intuition. I think it's the brand of pattern recognition that comes from the extroverted feeling process, or what we call harmony. So there's all these different styles of pattern recognition woven into all of the functions. So you don't have to be an intuitive in order to have a strong and vibrant brow chakra. This is more of your ability to be open to these sort of quote unquote messages, wherever they come from, whatever is allowing you to have that instinct that your child might be in danger or sick, or that instinct that somebody's in the room. There's still, all of us have that ability, and a strong brow chakra will allow you to be open to that. And you can see when people have closed down their brow chakra. They're not open to anything that isn't right in front of them, or something that they could define as empirically true. And so then they end up missing things. They end up having trouble understanding maybe basic concepts that require a little bit of openness to be able to grasp. And so they stay really tightly regimented with archaic or old ideals, maybe even draconian ideals, because they don't have that sense of openness there.
The final chakra we're going to talk about today, the seventh chakra, is what's called the crown chakra. Often it's referred to as a violet color. And this chakra is associated to the top of the head, located at the top of the head, and it is associated with enlightenment, spirituality, cosmic understanding, connection to something like a higher power or a higher authority. And often this is where people find spiritual expression or spiritual connection with what they've determined is the divine or some element of the divine that they've understood for themselves. And so this has a directional upward angle. So it's not like the others where the root faces downward, this faces upward, all the others face like forward in your expression or how you can imagine them.
Like horizontal,
yeah,
as
horizontal.
opposed to vertical. Yeah.
And this one is at the top of your crown, called the crown chakra. So if you're a creative person, you write or do something creative, sometimes this can be the center of inspiration where you get quote unquote downloaded with some new understanding or new creative, like, oh wow, what if we did this? And it wasn't really something that you can point to. It was almost inspirational that came to you. The muse, the writing muse that might show up to a writer, for example, when they sit down to their typewriter. Geez, how old am I? Computer. I didn't even use a typewriter when I was a kid. Why am I saying typewriter? But this is something that the muse can show up in your life and give you inspiration to create or to be inspired to do something that all of a sudden came to you through the crown chakra.
Yeah. I don't think you have to necessarily see this in any specific... Like, you don't have to attach this to any specific source of divinity. I think it is inherently divine, and I think it is inherently enlightening. That's the point of it, is that this is the space of transcendence and enlightenment and divinity and sacredness and inspiration and creativity. And so you can be plugging yourself into a specific God source. There's a lot of people who talk about source in a generic sense, so it doesn't have to be attached to any specific God. It could just be called the source. It could be a specific God. It could be a pantheon of gods, or it could be the collective unconscious. It could be, like in Hindu traditions, this is what allows you to understand the concept of Maya, that we're all surrounded by a physical world that is an illusion, and this helps you transcend that illusion. So there's a lot of different interpretations of how you could take this. For me, I think my crown chakra, because I've not necessarily always been a particularly, I was a quite religious person growing up, but I wouldn't say that I've ever been specifically spiritual. And I would say my crown chakra is also something like my heart chakra that usually needs a little bit of attention. But I think for me, I'm totally fine with tapping into something that's bigger, but doesn't have to have specific definition around it. And anytime I experience any form of faith, which is not very often, admittedly, however, it does exist inside of me. I think you can't really be a human without having a sense of faith in something. And I don't mean necessarily religious faith, but like faith is like, oh yeah, I'm going to get up tomorrow morning. That's going to totally happen. I'm not going to die in my sleep. Like that's a feeling of faith. So there's definitely a component of that. And then maintaining that sense of inspiration along with that faith, that it's going to be positive and good, and that you're going to tap into something that helps guide you along a path, something that wants good things for you, wants good things for everyone. And this idea of being too skeptical, where you shut all of that down, or this idea of only tapping into this source and assuming that everything you do is 100% protected, I think these are both variations of that lack of balance. I think we use the crown chakra to help guide our steps, especially if we're on a mission or we've got a purpose, or maybe we just have a passion. I think it helps guide us, but it's not going to be like, we can't just plug into that and assume everything's going to be okay. We also have to be self-directed. So I think the crown chakra is something that for me, I've had to come to a sense of balance around. Something that when I was younger, I was taught to 100% plug myself into something and assume that everything was going to be fine and I didn't have to think about anything. All the way over to a massively skeptical place where I didn't believe anything that couldn't be proven. And I think that for me, coming to a more balanced place in my crown chakra was accepting that there might be things that I don't have necessarily specific answers for. I mean, I'm talking about the chakra system right now on a podcast. So obviously I didn't go the massive skeptic route. I did for a while, but I feel like I've gotten more balance around that. And that's actually been that's been very inspirational for me. There's a lot of there's a lot of creativity that comes with that sense of openness. Not necessarily a sense of naivety, but a sense of openness. There's a lot more creativity in concept and different models and matching them up and being able to guide myself based on some of these maps and models that don't have to necessarily have empirical truth behind them, but have like an inspirational truth behind them.
What I love about working here at Personality Hacker, doing what we do, and being a part of you, listening, and the community that you're a part of. There's a lot of people of like minds that are part of the Personality Hacker community. I think it feels like a very positive, supportive community. But what we really strive to do is honor the individual and how they show up and how they're wired. And I think to what you just said about how there are extremes on both sides of seeing these chakras. The one side is that very scientific driven, if I can't see it in measure it, it doesn't exist. It's very much like, this is bullshit. I don't believe in these energy fields. This seems like a bunch of poppycock. All the way to the other side where this is the reality you might be living in. This might be something that really resonates with you, this idea of chakras. And you, to the degree where you understand it even more than Antonia and I do, and you've used it in your life, and it's part of how you see everything, and you're very in touch with these energy fields in your body. I believe that both sides of the extremes on this can utilize an understanding of chakras. Obviously, the people that are really into it are already using it in their lives. But I think if you're listening and you're maybe like, I don't know, man, this sounds like this is kooky or weird or different, or I have to use my imagination to access energy fields. What are these guys talking about? Allow yourself to open up to that idea a little bit, because even if it isn't real for you, even if you're not actually tapping into energy fields, what I love about the chakra system, like we've been talking about this whole time, is it gives you a language and a framework to look at different aspects of your life. And it gives you something to put attention toward. It gives you something to do for things that are esoteric by nature. So if you're feeling a sense of lack of power in your life, instead of just fretting about it and thinking, well, how can I synthetically get more power? I want to feel more power. You shift it to be more like, I want to feel empowered. And maybe there's energy imaginations I can do in my life that will allow me to feel more empowered, or to have a sense of empowerment when I show up to the world so I can express myself fully. And in using the chakra system for that, it can be helpful to anyone, even the most ardent skeptic can look at this system and go, you know what? Maybe it's not real for me. Maybe I don't see energy fields, but I could sit in the lotus position, imagine my heart chakra opening. I could imagine myself pouring out love for the people in my life that are difficult to love. Maybe there's a friend or a family member you have to be around a lot, and it's tough to love them. It's tough to hold space for them or be there for them because they just drive you crazy. And doing this imagination work and imagining this chakra center opening for you and love going out, it gives you a place to put your energy or your focus around the idea of love. Or let's say you're having trouble expressing yourself. There's a place for you to put your attention and your focus and your imagination toward. So I love it because it gives it a ability to break apart concepts and a physical place on your body to focus and do imagination work with. And again, if you're really into chakras, then this is something you already do. But if this is something that's brand new to you or you haven't really gotten into, I think it's a fantastic tool for your unconscious mind and your imagination to utilize to make your life better ultimately.
Yeah, I've noticed some patterns that go through it too. And if you look at all these different chakras, there really are different components of life that are just sort of basic areas of life that most people do development work around. Like a lot of people do development work around just getting their basic needs met, right? Like making sure that they're going to be okay. In Maslow's hierarchy of needs, that would be the safety and security level. And I would say that the root chakra definitely helps take care of that. And then the sacral chakra, a lot of people are trying to do things to up their game with intimacy, make their relationships more intimate, their pair bond partnership more intimate. Lots and lots and lots of personal development work gets done around sexuality and our relationship with sexuality. I mean, it could be argued that our relationship with sexuality might be one of the most important components in everything we do. Because why do we exist? We exist because the generation before us had a will to live. They had a will to live enough to mate and have children. And the generation before them and the generation before them, and all the way back to when we were like single-celled organisms splitting into two. The reason why we exist is because we've wanted to procreate. And that is the one constant throughout all of this. All living organic tissue exists because we have a drive to keep living and to pass our genes on. So sexuality is an integral part of the human experience. It's an integral part of humanity. And so when we have issues with our sexual experience or our sexuality, and those issues could be nothing that we've designed ourselves. They could be messages from society outside that say it's not okay to have your expression of sexuality, including things like being asexual, which is a completely legitimate place to be. And yet you might feel like a sense of like there's something wrong with you. So a part of the sexual component or that sacral chakra is coming to terms with your own personal sexuality, which is an incredibly powerful thing to do. And so if the chakra system is the first time you've been given permission to even go there, already it's worth its weight in gold. Because not everything tells us to attend to our sexuality. There's not a lot of messages we get that say, hey, go actively do personal development work around your relationship with your sexuality. And so the chakra system might be the first time we've really been given permission, not just permission, but told that is like that's necessary. And so, with the root chakra or the
solar
plexus chakra, empowerment, sovereignty, personal permission. I mean, that's a lot of the work that we do, and just all the way on up. All of these different chakras attend to different components of the general personal development experience. Our compassion for other people in our relationships, our message, our ability to open ourselves up to new concepts and narratives, our ability to tap into something bigger than us. All these are very basic components of personal development. One thing you were mentioning before the podcast when we were talking about what we were going to talk about, you mentioned, is it the book Kundalini Rising? Is that the name of the book?
It is a book I've read, yeah.
Okay. And one of the observations you mentioned from the book Kundalini Rising is this idea that you start from the bottom, and if something's plugged up from the bottom up, it's going to impact all the other chakras. Is that accurate? I didn't actually read the book. You did.
So the Kundalini is supposedly an energy coil, almost like a snake coiled at the base of all the chakras. And through energy work and imagination and energy imagination, things of this nature, you can actually awaken this energy field, this energy source that uncoils itself and moves up the chakras. And it can be a powerful experience for a lot of people where it feels like electricity is running from their root chakra all the way through their crown chakra. And it's like a blast of energy or a blast of light that runs through all these chakras. This is how people describe it feeling like. And they imagine, this bright light, this forceful energy almost blasting through their entire being energetically. And so that was what I was referring to earlier about in there. And I think that is like the next level of chakra, imagination, chakra work, energy work. It's this notion that once you begin to identify the chakras and you keep them clean and working and balanced and you are tapped in there, it's this idea of awakening energy that can move through and give you immense amount of power, immense amount of insight, immense amount of intuition and connection to the divine is what the basics are, I guess, without going too much into it.
What was that component of if something stopped lower down, it's going to mess up?
I don't know. I don't know if I read this directly in the book. I was mentioning this as how I see it personally, that,
okay.
For example, if like one of the chakras, and this might be part of some of the ideas around this, but if there's, like my solar plexus, I have a lot of work around that I do in the solar plexus. But if my solar plexus is out of balance, if it's blocked, if it's, energetically has some trouble there, I might have an imbalance in all my chakras. Like the upper chakras might not be getting the energy that I could draw up from the root chakra in this school of thought. And that's kind of how I think of it. And I'm not exactly sure if this is the correct teaching way that people
canon.
teach. Yeah, teach people that are into this, that really understand chakras and Kundalini and the energy movement through their bodies, teach it this way. But I have chosen to see it this way for myself, that in order to have a clean energy, flow, all of these need to be cleaned out or balanced. And I think I have read stuff where if the Kundalini is awakened and one of the chakras is not balanced, it can cause a lot of trauma for you because it's an energy blast through a chakra that hasn't necessarily been balanced correctly. And so it can cause some imbalance in your life because you've got incredible amounts of energy going through something that's not ready for the amount of energy that's coming through it. Can lead to, post experience of maybe depression or sadness or trauma or imbalance or erratic behavior because you've awakened energies through your body that your body or your chakra energy centers weren't ready for. Again, if that sounds way too woo-woo or way too out of frame for you, if you're more of a digits person that likes numbers and hard data and stuff, that's cool too. But just understand that this is a lot of the teaching, a lot of the understanding around this is around awakening that energy field in your body.
Yeah, well, and I that makes sense to me. I mean, I guess I kept pushing you to describe, like, if your root chakra is messed up, it's going to mess up all the subsequent ones that go up. But that's not anything you said, so I don't know if I'm accurate on that. But the reason why I was almost setting you up to try to explain that to me is because I was making an in-the-moment connection to Maslow's hierarchy of needs, which you can almost see how these almost directly... you can almost directly create a one-to-one practically. I mean, Maslow's hierarchy only has 5 levels, and the 7 chakras obviously have 7. But you could see how, like, the root and the sacral chakras might align to, survival and safety and security. And then, or maybe your solar plexus chakra and your heart chakra align to, like, your love and belongingness. And then your throat chakra aligning to your, like, self-esteem. And then your brow and your crown chakra aligning to self-actualization, potentially. I mean, This is like a really crude 1-to-1 ratio because I'm just kind of spitballing it right here. But if you have problems at the base of Maslow's hierarchy, then you're not really going to be able to graduate to the next one up because you're stuck at an earlier level. And I could see that happening with, I could see that happening with the chakras, that if you have trouble with a lower chakra, you might be experiencing trouble with the higher chakras. I remember Robert Anton Wilson in one of my favorite audio series is called Robert Anton Wilson Explains Everything, or Old Bob Exposes His Ignorance. And it's just an interview with Robert Anton Wilson, who I mention a lot because I love him. He's like a mentor of mine. I mean, unfortunately, I didn't get to meet him when he was alive, but I'll forever think of him as an important mentor of mine. And this is just an interview series. I think it's through the publishing company Sounds True. And I love Sounds True. Sounds True is a great publishing company. And so this interviewer, they were kind of talking a little bit about conspiracy theories and conspiracy theorists. And Wilson just kind of threw out, he's like, oh yeah, people who are into conspiracy theories, and because he's written a lot of books around conspiracy theories, that sort of thing. And they were talking about people who are into the occult and who are like really suspicious and super into conspiracy theories, but there are into occult things that are not skeptics. And he just kind of offhandedly goes, yeah, well, I've just kind of assumed that those people are people who opened up their brow chakra, but never opened up their heart chakra. And I thought that was really interesting. What happens if you put a lot of eggs in the intuition basket and you don't put any eggs in the heart basket, in the compassion basket? What happens? Well, if you're a person who has a tendency to want to see everything in terms of intuition and what's going on in the higher planes and that sort of thing, but you haven't opened up your relationship and your connection, center, then yeah, you're probably going to get kind of conspiracy theorist. You're going to get like suspicious of everybody and everybody's out to get you. So there are ways where you can see these things manifest, where you can tell that somebody's like maybe got a lot going on in one of the chakras, but doesn't have as much going on in another one. And some of these are, the components that show up, what emerges is something that might not be as healthy. So having all of those energy centers running at a good space is how we prevent those emergence, from how we prevent ourselves from getting to like maybe, highly skeptical if we shut down that brow chakra, or how we become conspiracy theorists and, suspicious of everybody. Well, our heart chakra isn't open. And I think being able to see these and get them to a place where they're in balance and a place where they're strong, I think takes care of a lot of issues that we might not even identify as being a part of these energetic spaces or centers, but they might actually be.
I've come from a place of being completely dismissive of this kind of stuff in the past. And I'm at the place in my life where I'm going to be studying and moving toward these type of ideas like chakras, qigong, energy work, because I've understood that there are things beyond my understanding, or the things that I just wrote off as a younger man I'm like, there might be something to this. I've seen things happen in my life by working with some of these metaphors, if you want to see them that way, or energy work, if you want to see it that way, however you want to express it or see it. I believe there's really power here. And so I'll probably, in future podcasts, I'll have better answers for you as I continue down the road of understanding chakras, understanding energy work, because it's fascinating to me. It's something that I believe, now that I feel very masterful over personality typology and other systems that are more about how people are wired and their minds are wired. Now I'm really interested in the energy wiring of people. How are we as humans connected energetically? How are we wired energetically? That's something that's on the forefront. And I think also, to your credit too, Antonia, you're also interested in this as well. I don't think this is something you dismiss either. I don't want to speak for you, but I believe this is something that is interesting to both of us as we move forward, because there's so much usefulness here. And if we can help bring it to you listening in a way that makes sense to you, and put a bridge there to bridge through, wow, I don't know, this sounds really crazy and woo-woo, to, okay, I can see how this is maybe useful in certain areas of my life. Well, that gets you something that you can now explore. It might work for you. It might be something that works for your personality or how you're wired individually. So I'm really excited about the future of understanding some of these things and bringing them to you as a listener in the near future as we continue to understand more and more of this stuff for ourselves.
Yeah, I'm almost true to typing. I know that you just talked about kind of transcending type and going towards something that doesn't necessarily have to do with typology, but maybe even true to type, I would say that you're naturally more attracted to this element than I am. You're more, as an ENFP versus ENTP, you're a lot more you read Kundalini Rising, I didn't read it. Like, you're just a lot more just naturally attracted to this sort of thing than I am. Whereas I'm very attracted to the stories and narratives we tell ourselves. And so when it comes to things like, it probably sounds like this is an apologist podcast almost, because we keep talking about how, like, well, if you might not be into it, and think of it in these terms if you want to. And I think it is because I do see us as bridges. I see us as, like, one of our main jobs here, if you could call it a job, one of our main missions, maybe mission would be a better word, is to get people to open themselves up to alternative ways of thinking in order to question whether or not their current way of thinking is authentically theirs.
Or serving them well.
Or serving them, exactly. So you might get to the end of this podcast and think that chakras are even more BS than you previously did. And that's perfectly acceptable as long as you spent the entire podcast with an open mind. And if at the end, your conclusion is after you played with it, tried it on for size, really allowed yourself to integrate the concepts, and then determined, I'm still not into that. That to me is a success. It's a success because you actually really, really tried to see it in terms of maybe, right? Yeah, maybe. I'll hold space for that. And maybe you previously thought they were total BS and you get to the end of it and you're like, wow, I really find it interesting how you explained it. Like, I thought that was really intriguing. Maybe I'm going to go check it out a little bit. And then you try it on for size and you do more research, and then you get to the end of it and you determine, you are actually into it. Or you're super into this and you hated the way that we explained it and it ruined your love of chakras. Like, as long as you are able to play around with concepts that might not naturally be in your wheelhouse, but you are able to do that and sit with it and question your previous assumptions, then to me, that's a massive win. So one of the reasons why we call this, we're going to talk about the woo-woo. For those of you who are super into chakras, hopefully that didn't sound super patronizing, but we do have a really big audience here. We have a really big audience of people of a variety of personality types. And some of those personality types are going to be really into what we're talking about right now. They're going to be like massively up their alley, and they're going to be like, I love the chakras. Thank you so much for talking about it. And some people are going to be naturally wired to find it incredibly, to be very skeptical of these concepts. And so we hope to be a bridge to different maps and models so that people can maybe make a little space for something that they might have otherwise just dismissed. And then it ends up being a very powerful concept for them.
Having said that, we want to hear from you. If you come over to personalityhacker.com, you can leave a comment or ask a question directly below this podcast on the website. It's personalityhacker.com. You can also join a growing community of like minds, people that think very similar to you. There are different personalities most likely, but They have a lot of shared values, shared interest in personal growth, becoming a better person, finding ways to connect to other humans and make our lives better collectively. If that's something that interests you, you should come over to facebook.com/personality hacker. You can also join us at twitter.com/personality hack. We'd love for you to be a part of this community and to have your voice heard as well. We think all these voices are honorable and should be heard and honored in order to see different perspectives of how we're all showing up to the world and contributing in our own unique ways.
If you enjoy what you hear, you can subscribe to us on iTunes and various Android platforms. And if you're feeling particularly giving, if you leave us a rating and review on iTunes, that would really help us out. They cross-promote us. They put us higher in the charts. We get more attention. So if you are feeling very giving, that is a gift you can give to us.
Yeah, subscribe on iTunes too. Or else we also have a Android app that you can download on your Android phone. It's just search Personality Hacker in the Google Play Store or whatever it's called now. And you can download that, and all the podcasts are directly inside that app too if you're using an Android device. And you can basically subscribe by downloading the app. We're also on the iTunes App Store as well. We have an app there as well with all the podcasts and things in there. My name is Joel Mark Witt.
And I'm Antonia Dodge.
Thanks for joining us for this discussion of chakras today on Personality Hacker. We'll talk with you on the next episode.